you agree with Bruce that these proceedings will erode Trump's, in a lot of people's eyes, image, a pristine image to them, the man who can do no wrong to his many Trump supporters? Will this proceeding erode that?
Well, I think it's a really difficult question to answer. My sense is that all of these proceedings right now, all four indictments, the three prior indictments and this one, have fed into Mr. Trump's persecution complex. He likes to be seen as a victim. He will use this to his advantage in his political campaign. He sees this almost more as a political struggle than a legal struggle. I think at this juncture, we've yet to see him stand in the dock, so to speak, stand publicly before a court. This is the first time he has been indicted, and he has had to show up at a jail. This is not a pristine courtroom where everything is formal and civilized. This is a jail, and it's the Fulton County jail, which is a notoriously appalling, dreadful, horrific place. So it's one of, if not the most horrific jails in the country. So that in and of itself, I think, is lending a certain, a different layer. It's creating a different environment, one that isn't, as I say, civilized and pristine and polite and genteel. But in terms of the political capital here, I think what we're seeing and what we will see, probably later this evening, Trump is going to give a speech somewhere, no doubt in front of a group of his loyal supporters who will endorse this idea that this is a witch hunt. And so I don't think we'll see his political capital being expended negatively yet. He's still in a position to use this to his advantage. There is no coincidence to the fact that this is all happening at prime time, 7:30 p.m. All the cameras are on him. So he is a master at the entertainment aspect. So I suppose in the short term, I think this is playing into the hands of Donald Trump. And the long term, we'll have to see how that plays out. Certainly, if this eventually ends with a conviction by a jury of American citizens, I think that will really have that's the moment when we'll really see a tremendous impact on the way in which he's perceived.
Well, you mentioned the speech that he's going to be doing in due course. What's he likely to say? That he's obviously, throughout he's been indicted, he's said that he's done no wrongdoing and this is a witch hunt from the Biden camp. So what's his defense going to be?
Well, I don't know, to be honest, I don't know if he's going to speak, and if so, to whom he's speaking. I assume, based on his prior, as you say, his prior practices, that he is going to take advantage of this. And I think it will be the same rhetoric that we hear, I'm the victim, the corrupt Department of Justice will be hurling abuse at those who are trying
I'm really sorry, nice his supporters, even more so.
Well, I think Bruce makes a very good point that when he uses the royal we, he, of course, brings in his entire base. But what was striking to me is that even now he is still contesting the results of the election. He's still standing there and wrapping himself in the flag as the true American, talking about his right to challenge the election. He is still asserting that the election was stolen from him. So yes, of course, it's as expected. He is going to present this as a witch hunt, as politically motivated, as the way in which Biden and the Democrats are conducting their election campaigns. You cannot, as Bruce said, you have every right to challenge the results of an election. You do not have the right to do the types of things that Donald Trump was doing. You do not have the right to encourage and incite an insurrection. And in Georgia specifically, it's just extraordinary that we heard the tape of the telephone conversation between Donald Trump and Mr. Raffensperger, who was the official, the Secretary of State, the official in Georgia, who was responsible for essentially declaring the winner for that state, without going into great detail. But in that conversation, we literally hear Mr. Trump asking him to find the 11,380 votes that were needed, suggesting to him that all he needs to do is say that he recounted. I mean, when you hear this type of evidence, when you cannot reach any conclusion other than the conclusion that this was interference in an election, the attempt to persuade, if not intimidate, a public employee from doing their job. I mean, if the President of the United States calls you and talks to you on the phone, that's intimidating. And I have nothing but the utmost respect for Mr. Ratzenberger, who is a lifelong conservative Republican, for his being able to stand up to the president and do the right thing. So yes, I think what we saw, we all anticipated, which is the I'm a victim, this is a political witch hunt. But what struck me initially was his brazenly standing and opening his comments by saying, by still contesting that that Joseph Biden is in fact the truly elected president.
Yes, thank you for that, Susan. You know, just going back for a lot of our viewers who are just tuning in now, what can we expect from the process? Just walk us through what the charges are going to be and what the court case is going to look like.
Well, what happened tonight was that Donald Trump essentially surrendered into the custody of the Georgia Justice Department. Ordinarily, when someone is arrested, a warrant is issued by a judge, the police show up at the door, they present the arrest warrant, and they haul somebody off to jail. It's not what happened here. What happened here was a much more civilized, much more sedate type of process. And this is causing a lot of people to argue that Donald Trump is being treated very differently from any other criminal defendant. His attorneys negotiated with the Georgia authorities. A time was set for him to show up and be processed, have his fingerprints taken, probably a mugshot taken. I'm not sure yet whether we know that that's been verified. And the charges will be read in court in about 2 weeks at a process that's called an arraignment. But essentially what's happening here is the Georgia District Attorney has filed an indictment, 98 pages, outlining the charges against Donald Trump that essentially they revolve around this idea that Donald Trump was the leader of a large criminal group of people who attempted to subvert the outcome of the 2020 election, and specifically did that by contacting, telephoning the Georgia Secretary of State, who is the person responsible for certifying who the people of Georgia had selected. Georgia, of course, one of the 50 states. The states come together during a presidential election. The secretary of each state then declares which candidate that state has voted for. Donald Trump attempted in a phone call that we've all now heard, specifically asked the Georgia Secretary of State to simply say that he had recounted and found 11,000, I believe it was 780 more votes. So essentially this indictment is all about interference in declaring the true winner of the election in the state of Georgia. And the RICO Act, which is the Racketeer Influenced Corrupt Organizations Act, it's an unusual act. It was essentially, it was originally created for the government to be able to prosecute organized crime, the mafia. That has now been extended and it's been applied more broadly to any situation where you have a large group of people operating as an enterprise. And Donald Trump is being seen as the leader of this criminal enterprise, of this group of people, Donald Trump and his 18 co-defendants. And the crime, the conspiracy that's being alleged, is this interference in the outcome of the election. This is an interference in the outcome of the election for the most powerful person in the United States, probably the most powerful person in the world. So the interference with that democratic process, we cannot underestimate the significance of the conduct that's been alleged here. And it will be a couple of weeks before those charges are all read out in open court in detail. Donald Trump will then enter a plea of either guilty or not guilty, and then the government and the defendants and their lawyers will work out dates for further hearings, for discovery, to list witnesses and so forth. And we will see how this pans out over the next many, many months.
Yeah, and Susan, as we know, this is not the only indictment. He also, as you said, faces 4 charges. So how will this affect the others?
Oh, well, that's a really good question, and it's really hard to say because this one is in state court. It is going to be cameras are allowed inside a state court. They're not allowed in federal courts. This case, in some ways, has some similarity to the case that's been brought in Washington, D.C., in which the special counsel there, special prosecutor there, is pursuing charges based on Donald Trump's conduct and activity and incitement of the insurrection on January the 6th, where a violent mob essentially attacked the Capitol where the President of the United States was being declared. It was the very last, somewhat ceremonial, almost a formality, but there was a mob that was incited by Donald Trump to attack the Capitol. Probably the most traumatic footage that people in this country have seen. They watched horrified as this mob attacked the attacked the Capitol building. So there is some similarity there because that involves the election. The other 2 cases are somewhat different. So they're not directly related. I wish I had a crystal ball and could tell you which trials would occur first. One of the defendants in this case has asked for the trial to go forward in November. The district attorney came back and said, okay, we'll start in October. That's not going to happen. This trial is going to take months and months and months of preparation. So with regards to this specific indictment and this specific trial, we won't be seeing any trial taking place for many, many months. And of course, we have to note that this is an election year. So the political, legal jumble here is going to be a sight to see.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a huge political jungle. A lot of uncertainties going forward. But Susan, thank you for being with us and talking through what the basics are.